Welcome back, friends. I'm your host, Dorina Gilmore-Young.
And I'm Sean Young, and you're listening to Season 2, Episode 4 of Walk, Run, Soar, a podcast about the intersection of faith and running.
We're so excited to jump into today's episode with you. We help runners and walkers who lack purpose with their exercise routine or maybe lack of routine and long to experience God in more meaningful ways while they walk or run. And today we are interviewing my new friend, Miranda Eserman, who is a certified trainer. She is an trainer and instructor at Body Bionics. And she's also a cross-country and track mom, which of course is dear to my heart. She has 4 kids, ages 10, 12, 14, and 16. And she's been married to Bryce for 18 years. And Miranda is also a marathoner and a triathlete. So we had a great conversation about her heart for running, for triathletes, for movement. She even has an interesting story about how she's been getting certified so she can help with people who have been through cancer treatments so that they can strengthen their bodies and get to a healthy fitness level after treatments. So stay tuned for this great episode with Miranda Eserman.
Friends, thank you for tuning into our podcast. We are here to run with you, to pace you, and to inspire you with weekly devotionals, scripture, interviews, and quick coaching tips in about the time it takes you to go for a short walk or run. So pop in those earbuds and listen in.
Each week, I start by sharing a short word of encouragement from Scripture to help give you a cool drink of living water before we go into our interview time. And many of these are adapted from my new devotional book, Walk, Run, Soar, which was published by Bethany House Baker Publishing back in September. So today we're going to center on this theme of running against the wind. I had a very interesting experience with running against the wind a few years ago. I ran a race that was down in Simi Valley. It was actually a half marathon called the Sombrero Run. And to be honest, I signed up for it because they said that you're going to get tacos at the finish line. So I thought it would be a fun one to run. And actually, it was not too far from Sean's mom's house. So we were going to go visit grandma and do this run. Well, I had no idea what I was going to face on race day. The race was, like I said, a great excuse to try running in a new city, which I always love the thrill of trying out new races. But when we arrived on that Sunday morning at the start of the race, there wasn't as much traffic as we expected. And that was maybe our first indication that this was going to be a windy day. So we were in the parking lot, and I distinctly remember just kind of getting my gear together, and I didn't want to get out there too soon and be too cold. The girls were in the car, Sean and I were in the car together, and we saw this porta potty actually careen across the parking lot because the wind picked it up and took it. And again, that was probably a good hint for me that this was going to be a windy race. So I was running this one solo. Sean and the 3 girls were there to cheer me on to the finish line. And as promised, the course was very flat with just a few rollers, but I did not expect how windy it was going to be. And down in Southern California, there's something called the Santa Ana winds, which are very strong. And they definitely were whipping up on that day. So I was wearing my hair in a ponytail and it was flying all over the place. I was forced to squint just to keep the dust from flying into my eyes. And I felt like I was working so hard, but getting nowhere fast. It was almost like running on a treadmill because I was feeling that wind blowing against me and I didn't feel like I was moving forward at all. But thankfully, I brought my phone with me. And so I was able to call Sean and I asked him, can you grab my sunglasses, get me some chapstick? And he and the girls passed off some supplies to me at the next spot where he had planned to meet me. because I was desperate for reprieve. I had trained for this half. I wanted to get to the finish line, but there were certainly some big obstacles in front of me, and there were very few people in the race. So I didn't have that usual sense of encouragement and people cheering me on to keep going. There were actually some long stretches that I was running by myself. I remembered the disciples in Matthew 8 who found themselves in a boat in the middle of a storm. The wind whipped against them and the waves started to spill over the side of the boat. And meanwhile, Jesus was napping. Do you remember this story? The disciples woke him up, and Matthew described it in this way. The disciples went and woke him up shouting, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." And Jesus responded, "Why are you afraid? You have so little faith." And then he got up and rebuked the wind and the waves. And suddenly there was a great calm, as it says in Matthew chapter 8, 25 through 26. These men had been ministering with Jesus and they witnessed him performing many miracles. But when this storm came, they relied on their own strength and they kind of panicked when it all was going down. And so in this scene, Jesus represents and demonstrates his power over nature, including the wind and the waves. The disciples were amazed, and we still get to read this story today and be amazed. And they said, "Who is this man? Even the wind and waves obey him." In Matthew 8:27. I'm sharing that story with you today because I don't want us to forget who created the wind and the waves. And Jesus was working in tandem with his Father and the Holy Spirit all the way back in Genesis to create the earth and all of its elements, the wind and the waves, the ocean, the mountains, the flowers, the trees. And they created the wind and had the power to calm it when they chose to. God working together in the Trinity. The wind often kind of feels like those trials that we face in our life, that pushback that we feel sometimes when we're following Jesus or we're facing crisis. Maybe you're kind of like me, where I'm often relying on my own strength to weather the storm. And so I love this Bible story because it just reminds me how much, first of all, that I am like those disciples who were in the boat with Jesus, who had seen many miracles, had seen and witnessed his faithfulness, but still fell back to relying on themselves. I think about that race that I was running in Simi Valley. You know, there were times where I felt isolated and I felt alone. I wondered, was I even making any progress towards the finish line? And, you know, sometimes the enemy uses that against us when we're in the life race and we feel isolated, we feel alone. I know in this past year, a lot of us have been struggling with that because of being socially distanced and sheltering at home and some of the things that have come with this pandemic. But I want to encourage you today with these words from Exodus 14:14, which is one of my favorite scriptures. It says, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." And so our job, friends, is not to fight against the wind. It's to be still and to trust the Lord. And I love that I had that very real experience in the Sombrero Run. I have to say, I did make it to the finish line. I found this woman at around mile 11 who was running a little bit ahead of me. And it was just perfect because I decided to follow after her. And I realized then that I was not facing the wind alone. So I was able to just kind of fix my eyes on her feet and keep running and run to the finish line. And my husband and my kids were there, and I did get to eat my tacos. Welcome back, friends. I'm so excited today because we are interviewing my new friend and fellow Hope Rider, Miranda Eserman. And I'm excited to dive in with Miranda, especially because she's a mom, she's a coach, she's a marathoner and a triathlete herself. And she's really passionate about helping other people chase their goals. And so she's been in the fitness industry for more than 25 years. And we connected through this writing group called Hope Riders that I mentioned. So Miranda also joined our team to help us launch our book, Walk, Run, Soar, in the fall. And we have had fun just getting to interact with her through our Glory Chasers Christian running group as well. So, Miranda, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about your family, where you live, and kind of how you spend your days?
Thank you, Doreen and Sean, for having me. I live in Lantana, Texas. It's north, kind of near Denton area, and we have 4 kids. Right now is a great year because it's 10, 12, 14, and 16. I've been married for about 18 years, and I'm a personal trainer. So right now it's a little kind of crazy on how that works, but mostly virtual right now. And I've also, during the day, been able to spend time training myself, just in running. And of course, just the daily grinds of kids and tournaments and laundry. And I am taking a cancer specialty certification right now. So I've been in school for about 6 months, just kind of learning a different genre of wellness and fitness, which I love. I love that challenge. So it's been good kind of learning with the kids.
How did you get started with running and exercising?
When I was young, like when I was 5, I would wake up early before school and start to mousercise. Yeah, the Mickey Mouse Club, and they would have this mousercise, and I would get up before school and just kind of start that. And I just loved it. I love starting my day that way. And then through high school, I played soccer and cheered. And then it just kind of, on the weekends, my dad was kind of a recreational runner. And so we would kind of go to the local high school track and I would tag along while he ran. And so I did that. And then it wasn't until about 2014 where I thought, well, I might try a marathon. I had done various 5Ks here and there in college, but it wasn't until that time that there was a group of girls that were a little bit more experienced than I and kind of took me under their wing. And, we started running in the mornings together, and I'm like, well, I enjoy this. So it's kind of where it all started. And then, after that, you're hooked. And you got to keep going. So, yeah.
So it all started by a mouse.
But they were onto something. They redid it, and it's not the same. I'm like, I told the kids, I'm like, no, this is not.
Well, I know that you're a mom and you've mentioned your kids a couple of times, and I understand that your kids actually are athletes and runners as well. So can you share with us a little bit more about running and exercise and how it's a part of your family culture?
Sure. Yes. 2 of them are on the cross country and track team at the high school. And then 2 of them play soccer with a club team. And then they kind of do just some other like basketball and football and stuff. But, it's been good because from running myself, I just have a lot of respect for what they do. They wake up early and they run. We're able to have this same dialogue of, how'd you feel? And, they come in and they're like, I started out too fast. I'm like, I know. So it has really just brought us together. I was never, like I said, I played soccer and cheered really. And so I never really sat under somebody that with a lot of experience as far as a coach was concerned. And so I love picking their brains about what they're doing and strides and techniques and stuff. And so, I think just to be always open, even though they're 14 and 16. I mean, I may have run further than them as far as like a marathon and triathlons, but they are just speedy fast. I mean, they just, on Strava, it's just kind of, they're like easy run, 4:45 pace, like.
So what's their specialty? He sounds like you've got some fast guys over at your house.
They do. Well, in cross country, it's the 5K. And then I think for track, my daughter's going to do the 2-mile. And then I think my son is going to do the mile. So
awesome.
They have some dreams. They're really putting in some effort. And I just, wherever they're at, whatever they want to do, I just cheer them on and just try to encourage them in that.
I know that Texas has a really strong high school sports leagues or out there. I'm sure that they're finding great competition to help propel them forward.
Yes, that is so true. I mean, and whether it be a soccer tournament or cross country, if it's just such a high level that I just, I'm just always like, just, keep having fun and stay injury free. Like that's kind of our mantra.
Yeah.
But I love that there's so many amazing coaches and people that you can just learn from. There's such a wealth of knowledge in this area. And I just have a lot of respect for, the people that put time into our kids and, especially right now.
You have a lot of experience running longer distances, marathons, triathlons. What attracts you to endurance events?
Oh, I just love how it just kind of really mirrors life. I think just in those endurance events, what is true at mile 17 is not true at mile 22. Your mind can shift, your body can change and stuff. I love how the Lord just reveals things throughout just that journey of being faithful, of being dedicated through that whole, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours that it takes just to finish. My first marathon that I signed up for, I actually didn't finish. There was a snowstorm that came in.
Wow.
We got to mile 18. I did it with a friend and we got to mile 18 and they closed the course.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
The thing is they sent you the medal. And so we got to mile 18. They ended up sending the medal. And I just stared at that thing for like a year. And I was like, used to be a Montessori teacher. So I just brought it because like, this is the medal. This is
Oh my goodness. That's like
the Little Rock Marathon is like known for the size of their medals.
Yep.
But when you don't complete it, it just stares at you. So maybe that's kind of what, kept bringing me back. I'm like, well, the next year I'm like, well, I got to complete it now, and then it just, it kept going. So, but in that, I think that a lot of times there's this fear of I won't finish. And then that kind of came true. And so I think that, I think it just is so good that happened. I actually didn't even finish my first triathlon that I did because of weather again. So, a lot of times just this fear of maybe it's just me. I don't know. But what happens when you don't finish a dream or a goal that you set out to do? And what do you do with that? And that's just kind of true in life, I think. So I feel like just through marathon, through triathlon, I feel like the Lord's just really spoken to me just in deep, honest conversation of, when your fears come true, like what do you do with that? And I think just endurance and distance just really reveals a lot of you, scary parts, scary pieces, that when you're just vulnerable with yourself. And I just love just not being afraid of failure. And I feel like there's just a lot of humor in my life. I just kind of live in plan B. And so how he speaks to me, and he just knows that.
Well, I have kind of a practical question kind of along with that. Just as a mom with having so many kids and juggling all your things, how do you make that time for training? What does that look like for you?
When there's a weekend of meets and tournaments, then that long run moves to the middle of the week. If it can't happen, then I think just through a background of training and kinesiology, like how to emulate that workout in a shorter time span. How do you get that same muscle group when you don't have the time? What exercises can you do to kind of revamp that? I mean, sometimes it does take that discipline of waking up at 4:30 in the morning. Once you get a couple steps in, then it's okay. But those voices beforehand are just, a little tricky. I ran at 11:30 at night before. I think that it's just having grace with yourself, just having the flexibility to change things around and know that you're not disappointing the schedule. It's just life. It's just, you want to be there for your kids. You want to be there for your family. but you have these like secret goals inside of you still. You have these dreams. And I think my kids see that. They respect that. I still am carrying some dreams of my own. And and they're just cheering me on as much as I'm cheering them on.
I love that you said that too. I think for myself as a mom of 3 girls, them being athletes, them understanding, but also, through the years, even from the time they were little babies, just pushing them in the jogger and them getting the experience of being at races. They go to races and cheer for us. And I think it is good for them to see us as moms having those goals, setting those goals, even just modeling for them that lifestyle of being active, of moving. And it doesn't mean we always have to be on the podium, but just that we're working towards a goal. So I love that you model that for your kids too.
Even as a trainer, I just hear that a lot of just like the kind of the guilt that, moms do carry of just being selfish with their time. But I actually sat my kids down, especially when I was training for the half Ironman. And, there was a little bit more time dedicated to that. And, I'm like, are you guys okay with this? Laundry is a little, I'm not sure what you're eating every night, is everybody okay? And they're like, we are so proud of you. You're doing great. Like, I love it. So I think how we perceive what they're going to think and what their actual perception of how they see it is so different. It's just, it's just different. Just like they cheer for me and they know that mom's not going to win the half Ironman. I can say to them, how you cheer for me? Well, I know that you may not win this tournament or may not be the fastest here, but it's the same joy. You don't have to win it.
I understand that you have been researching adhesions and scars and how they affect the body. Can you tell us more about your research?
I used to be in injury prevention before I stepped into personal training. I was an athletic trainer at Alabama. So I was just around injury all the time. So I just had a respect for it. And I wanted to kind of get to the person before injury happened. So I've always been fascinated with that. But about 3 years ago, I guess I had my first real running injury and I tore my calf. And the moment it actually tore was I was stepping down from a ladder, of course, but it had been bothering me prior to that. And then I retore it at a triathlon, sprinting to the finish line. I felt great. And then I felt it tore again. And so from there, I've just been my movement pattern never really regained what it should have felt. I could feel my gait shift and change, and I could feel other things starting to evolve. And that's just kind of what happens when we're injured. Our body is just phenomenal and we'll find a way to work around it, but it may not be the most efficient way. It may not be, we're going to be loading a muscle group that is not intended to take that load. And so I just was fascinated by that on so many levels, even taking it to just a spiritual level. When there's something we try to avoid that's like a deep wound, and we'll just kind of either pretend it's not there or just grind through it and not address it. The Lord created us, right? We're made in his image. So obviously all these parallels with the body and our relationship with him just really struck me. And so I just started kind of pouring more time into myofascial release and just the fascia in the body, how we hold on to those things and how to kind of more unconventional ways to release some of those adhesions and scar tissue rather than just, stretching and stuff. So I just try to kind of pull from just different areas to see how can we heal. And then in turn, what are things in my life that I've been avoiding or that I've worked around. And so it's just been a great personal journey. And I just love learning. I feel like with the human body, it's just endless. So I love just kind of stretching that aspect of it.
Well, I was also fascinated to hear that you're working on this certification to work with individuals who are post-cancer treatments so that they can regain a healthy lifestyle. And that's something else that I would love to hear more about.
I think about a year ago, we lost my stepdad to melanoma. And prior to his passing, I went out for a visit and kind of sat there with his occupational therapist. And when he was just even too weak to stand at that point, and she was suggesting him going upstairs and just asking him a lot of questions. And at that point, the tumor had kind of moved over his mouth. So it was really difficult for him to speak. And so I just kind of paused in that moment of, just when you love somebody and I'm not an occupational therapist. However, I do know a little bit about the body. And so I'm like, surely there's other ways than to get him to move that it's not going to be so uncomfortable. And so after he passed, like I said, I'm just constantly trying to see how fitness and exercise can reach different people. And I wanted to explore, exercise and with cancer patients and stuff, and how that can look different. And it has been so eye-opening because I was not familiar of all the surgeries and procedures and, medications and just things that are involved. And, it's been just so good just to do this for him, just to honor him. And in a way, be in a position where I know more information now so that I can help kind of be that liaison between they get out of physical therapy and then they're on their own. They still can continue to get healthy and to get fit, but there's kind of this gap there. And so this certification will just kind of help just to fill that gap of that. It will wrap up next week. So I'm I'll be excited.
Well, I think it's just beautiful. I've never heard about anything like that before. Some of our listeners know that my first husband, Eric Lee, died of melanoma cancer. And just even for myself too, being introduced into that world, I didn't have anyone prior to him that I really had watched go through cancer. And I just love your heart for that even exists. So thanks for sharing with us today.
On this podcast, we love to talk about the intersection of running and faith. How do you see those two together?
Oh, I feel like they're just one and the same, right? I was even thinking of my run this morning. You kind of get going and you think, this isn't going to be a great run. Like I can already tell. It's just, I'm not feeling great. I didn't sleep enough. And what I had for dinner last night and stuff. And then a mile into it, it can just change. I feel like that is where like the Lord speaks to me just so clearly, these runs where he's like, I'm not done yet. Like, or just wait, just watch, just be patient. Running can teach us so much about our relationship with him through patience, through just kind of pressing through, even when physically we feel like it's just not going to happen. Today's not the day, but to just kind of see it through. So it just has really opened my eyes to just so much of what he can, teach us through those times. Also, I feel like when you go to a race or you see somebody with like the same race shirt that you wore, you just have this common thread. You just have this like, suddenly you're like, oh yeah, right. Mile 15. What was that about? And, you just have this easy connection of people that you would never have initially been able to be connected to. And, it's just such a reflection of the body, right? We're just all so different. And he threads us together through different circumstances and situations that we would have never been in the same room together otherwise. And I feel like running the same way, we just kind of, share like you've done this marathon or that marathon or this race, what it took to get there. So you just have this immediate reverence and respect for this person just for being out there and, the work that it took, to get there and stuff. And so I think that, then it just kind of comes together and we're just kind of despite knowing anything about each other. I mean, when we went races and our names on, people are like cowbelling you, like, Miranda, you look so strong. You're doing amazing. And you're like, you don't know anything about me. And you're probably lying, but thank you. I know they're just cheering you. And isn't that just what he does? Right. Like he just cheers us on regardless of how we're feeling or regardless of how we're doing. I feel like it's just endless on how he just works into the running community and, the running itself.
So true. Oh, girl, you're speaking my language here. I love all those lessons that the Lord teaches us when we're out on the trails or running on the road. So good. Well, that kind of brings me to maybe more of a fun question. I have to ask you if you have any race stories that you'd like to share with us. Do you have a favorite, maybe triathlon or marathon that you ran that you could just share with our listeners? Maybe a few out there who have the shirt at home that they can say, oh yeah, I remember mile 15.
I remember that. For triathlon, it can be very intimidating, to get into. I mean, it can be very expensive. Their bikes are worth more than my house. It's like amazing what can go in there. I had done one triathlon where, I spent a lot more time in the water and I was feeling a little bit more confident. I mean, nothing spectacular, but feeling a little bit more at ease. And I kind of look ahead and I'm first in the water, which was just like, unbelievable for being that. I was first until I hit like a cement wall. Apparently I had detoured and then ran into like the kiddie pool, like section or something. And so then I had to kind of get out of that and then rejoin blast, and try, they talk about spotting, like you have to just do your strokes and then kind of peek up and make sure you're running your tangents correctly and stuff. And so, but with that, I just laugh and, when you think you're just like, I'm doing amazing. And I feel like every race is just, just an experience in itself. Another try was in California through Escape for Alcatraz. And, San Francisco is so hilly. It's unbelievably hilly. And, going down a hill, I kind of mistimed it, couldn't switch gears. And so I'm climbing up and then just stop and land on the road, and the apartment complex is just like standing, giving me a standing ovation. And stuff. I think as long as you have just a really good sense of humor, and I feel like a lot of people don't go for these goals of like, I want to do a triathlon or I want to try a marathon or a half marathon because they have these fears of messing up. And I'm just here to say you will, you will. And there's such good stories that you just don't want to miss out on. I mean, they're just, it's just too good. And there are endless stories, like that. But I think every race is just, you get a little bit of humble pie and then you see a little bit of progress. And, it's just good to laugh sometimes, laugh at yourself.
I love that perspective, just having humility and having humor. That's so important.
Yes.
And racing definitely does generate a lot of stories.
Right.
From personal experience, there are so many stories to tell.
Yes.
Just random things that have happened to me, mistakes that I've made, and things. In the heat of the moment, I'm like, oh no,
right.
This is awful. But then looking back on it, okay, yeah, that's pretty funny looking back.
Yes, for sure. Exactly. You wouldn't want to take those stories back for anything. Yeah.
And oftentimes in marathons and triathlons, I always feel like I live an entire lifetime encompassed within those, 2, 3, 4, 5 hours or 10 hours, however long the race takes me. I feel like it's an entire lifetime.
In the Tulsa Marathon, they have an option where you can go up this little, it's like 0.1, 0.2, like a little extra, and you get a token. And I'm like, I really feel like that was 10 miles. Like that was not a little, and then you can, because it's like the shortest ultra marathon. Like then you end up running like 26.3, I think, or 26.4. So you could say you ran an ultra. So yeah, I'm an ultra marathoner too. I didn't put that in.
Okay, we'll add that to your bio.
Okay, thanks.
Anything over 26.2,
right?
you're an ultra.
It's legit. Hey, you did that a 10-mile loop, it sounds like.
Right. And I'm just staring at this coin. They give you this coin. I'm like, I don't know if you are worth it.
Well, it's been so fun to talk to you. I'm sure we could tell stories about races all day. Sean and I both have lots of fun ones. But I want to just ask, how can people connect with you or follow what you're doing? I'd love to allow our listeners to make more connection with some of the things that you mentioned on today's broadcast.
Thank you. When I run, I normally use Strava. So that's just a great way to just kind of connect there. I love cheering my friends that I don't live nearby on with that. Also on Instagram, Miranda Eserman, and Facebook as well. I do have a blog that is in the works. If you go to mirandaeserman.com, I've kind of started to take all these stories and start to release them a little bit.
Well, we'll definitely include those in the show notes. And we just want to say thank you. Thanks for taking some time out and just for encouraging us with your words and your stories today.
Thank you so much. It's great seeing you guys.
Today's coaching tip is about running in cold and windy weather. As the temperatures dip, a windbreaker vest or jacket is an excellent way to keep the chill off your chest and block the wind from cutting through you. Also, start a run a little slower than normal to give your legs and lungs a little more time to warm up. And lastly, make sure you have a set of dry clothes that you can change into right after your run so that you can cool down at a more controlled pace. We also want to invite you to share your questions about running and walking. If you go to the Anchor app or web link for our podcast, there's a spot where you can click message and leave us your questions. Be sure to include your name and city when you ask your question. I'll try to incorporate these in future coaching tips.
Before we close today, I just wanted to share a few more details about our new book, Walk, Run, Soar, which is a 52-week devotional or training journal that's designed for runners and walkers. So any pace can use this resource. And this is especially for those of us who long to experience God's presence in a deeper way. As we pound the pavement or we traverse the trails, this is a great time of year to start something like this. The way that it's designed is you can read one devotional a week, or you can read it at your own pace, maybe one a day or a couple per week. And I have heard about some people doing this book together with friends. So if you have maybe a running group or a running partner, this might be a great way to stay connected, both physically and spiritually, that you can keep yourselves accountable to keep moving in 2021, but also to be in God's word together.
We would love to connect with you more personally. We host the Glory Chasers Christian Running Group over on Facebook, where we offer up courage, coaching, and community. It's a great place to connect with Christian runners from all over the world.
So friends, thanks for joining us today. This was season 2, episode 4 of the Walk, Run, Soar podcast, where we talk about the intersection of running and faith. Please make sure to hit subscribe on the podcast. That way you can get the new episodes when they drop each week. Typically, they are ready by Wednesday morning, and we would love it if you would share these podcasts with friends, running buddies, even coaches that you're in connection with. We look forward to seeing you next time.